Hi, I'm Dr. Vonda Wright, and this is Hot for Your Health. Join us for conversations on the bleeding edge of science, health, and culture as we bring you tech innovators, thought leaders, and the movers and shakers who are transforming science fiction into your new health reality. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Vonda Wright, and welcome back to another episode of Hot for Your Health, where we talk every week to people who are changing the world. And so today I'm speaking with Teun Toebes, and I'm going to spell that for you so that you can Google him and his work. First name is spelled Teun, last name is spelled Toebes, and you're going to want to look him up because even having only devoted 25 years, which is your whole life, to healthcare innovation, humanitarian activism, you have already produced a book called Housemates, and you have already created an award-winning documentary called Human Forever, documenting your time as a nurse living with people with dementia. And I have to tell you, when I first heard about your work, I had never heard of anyone devoting so much time to a subject that they would become embedded to learn about it. So I'm so thrilled to have you today.
Thank you so much, Vonda, and I'm really pleased to be here. Sorry for my name, by the way, because it's the most Dutch name ever. But thank you so much for spelling it.
Well, I'm sorry that I do not have any practice pronouncing Dutch names, but maybe more in the future as I get to know.
No problem at all.
So I would love for you to spend the first however many minutes you want telling my audience about your story, your background, and then we'll get into this 3-year living. I don't want to say project. It was more than a project. It was life.
It's a way of living.
It's a way of living. Yes. So who are you? Tell us your story.
Well, my name is Teun Toebes. I'm 25 years old, and I'm on a mission to improve the quality of life of people living with dementia worldwide, because I deeply feel worried about the future of people living with dementia, because now we treat people mostly as patients. We dehumanize people and we strive for quality of care. But what's the most important in order to reach a change is that we start listening to people themselves. And if we listen, it's not about quality of care, it's about quality of life. And that's a fundamental different approach. And I have to say, I had an internship in a nursing home because I did the study to become a nurse, and I did a master's in care ethics and policy. And during my study, the main aim was always quality of care. If you could improve quality of care, we see you as a good carer. And I was working in a nursing home for a few years, and I asked my colleagues, would you like to live in a nursing home yourself? And surprisingly, almost all my colleagues said, no, of course not. So I was raising questions like, why did we create a system by all the good intentions we have, which is a system where we don't want to live in ourselves? And what should we do to change that? And we have to change the narrative, because the actual care system is the product of the way we look. And I strongly believe that if we start looking differently, that we will do things differently. So because of that, I decided to move into a care home, onto the closed ward of a nursing home, to start living together with people with dementia. Because if we speak about dementia, we mainly see dementia as a care problem, but in the end, it's a societal issue. It's about all of us, because there's a chance from 1 in 5 to get diagnosed with a form of dementia yourself. In a nursing home, I came in touch with Jonathan de Jong. He's the filmmaker and he's a good friend of me. And we decided to combine our forces in order to tell a different story about dementia and to bring it to the world stage. So we decided to create the movie Human Forever, which is now being screened in 18 countries, where we are really thankful of, because dementia is not about borders of countries. It's about all of us, and it's about our cultural perception in the way we look at people living with dementia or people living with other diagnoses.
You know, you said something interesting that for clinicians, for people who are not clinicians like you and me, they might not understand the distinction that you are drawing. The distinction between high standards of care and high standards of living. Because when, for instance, I started my career as a nurse first also, and good care, I'm air quoting for those of you who can't see me, means nobody falls out of bed. Everybody is confined to one space so that they stay safe. People eat food, not necessarily what they like, but just to get some calories in them. That by outcome standards could be good care. But I think what you're talking about, and please elaborate on this when I stop, quality of life means that not everybody has to eat the same food. They don't have to be tied in a bed or a wheelchair to prevent falls, that you don't have to keep everybody in a room and deprive them of fresh air just because it's safer. Is that the distinction you're making?
I think you're absolutely right, Vonda, because if we go back a little bit and we go to the home I was living in, I decided to start living in a nursing home when I was at the age of 21. In total, I lived there for over 3.5 years. There was only one thing, and that is that I had the code of the door. I had the code for the closed ward. The code's 2017. My housemates, people living with dementia, they didn't have the code. And the fact that we still have a closed ward, especially in the Western world, tells a lot about the way we organize healthcare systems. We organize systems based on risk control, risk management. Healthcare systems are focused on control and safety rather than on quality of life. And my message is not that safety is not important, but it's more about the balance between safety on the one hand and quality of life on the other hand. But what I found the most suppressing about living in a care facility, in an institute, is that the collective safety was always heavier in the decisions we had to make than the individual's quality of life. And this is about the way we look at our lives in the Western world, because we almost don't accept risks, especially when people get diagnoses, because we want to protect people. But we, as a society, that's why it is a societal issue, we have to accept that also a life living with dementia comes with risks. If we stay focused on having zero risks, then life will be zero as well. And to elaborate with 3 concrete examples by what you've said, I was sitting in the living room in a nursing home with beautiful housemates, with, for instance, my housemate Ad, with my housemate Ellie, with my housemate Tineke, with my housemate Eugenie, and all my housemates had a very beautiful identity. I didn't know what type of dementia they had. I didn't know who was their legal representative. I only knew what they showed me. But our answer, based on the healthcare system, was not supporting their identity, but was supporting their needs based on the medical perspective. 3 examples. The first, if my housemates had the risk to fall, then we would send an email to the physiotherapist and he would come to have a risk analysis. And if my housemates have a higher risk to fall, then maybe they get a walker. Another example, second one, if my housemates had the risk to choke, then we would send an email to the dietitian and they would come and they would give thickener. If my housemate, for instance, had a risk to not eat, thirdly, then we would send another email to the dietitian and then the dietitian would come for a risk analysis for my intake, my physical intake, the food, the amount of liquids. And then if I don't eat enough, for instance, we would give you protein drink, nutri drink. My message is not to say that the functions of those people are not meaningful, that they can't be meaningful. I don't say that those products, they can't be meaningful. But what I say is that the poverty of our welfare is that we created a system in which we give people products without asking them, what do you need in order to support your quality of life? And this is about our answer in our healthcare system is medicalization rather than normalization, which people ask for. And that's so badly needed to change that.
That's an amazing perspective. And tell me how that plays out when you talk about the personalities of Ott and your housemates. And there are every once in a while, as I'm going through my social media, something will pop up where the one in particular I'm thinking about, there's a world famous tenor, and I forget his name, who, when you have dementia, sometimes you aren't able to recall the present day, but you are still who you were in your youth, in your brain. So this tenor is sitting in his place of residence, and a soprano comes and sits in front of him and starts singing Ave Maria. And without prompting, this tenor becomes who he is,
Yeah.
which is a tenor on the stage of the Met or whatever big opera house in Europe he sang in, singing the most beautiful Ave Maria you could envision a 90-year-old singing, right? And so he hasn't forgotten who he is. Are you saying we forget who they are?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because, and that's also what I heard, people are here. It's not people are still here, because then we say that they will go away. But people are here till their heart stops beating. So what I've learned in living together with people with dementia is that it's possible to come in contact with everyone in whatever stage of dementia someone is, as long as we keep seeing the human being. If we keep seeing the human being, then he will never, never disappear. But I have to say, some people in our society, they feel anxious about dementia, and people feel fear when it is about dementia. And this tells us a lot about the way we look at valuing someone's life in our world, because sometimes I hear, and it deeply touches me, that we see dementia as a total loss of identity, because your rational capacities are developing in a different way as which we are used to. But the fact that those rational capacities are developing in a different way doesn't mean that you are a less meaningful human being, because you still have your emotional being, you have still other forms of being, and you are here. So we have to support people's identity in that. And what I heard from my housemates, but also what we heard from all the travels around the world to see how different countries cope with dementia, is that indeed dementia can be really painful. It can be painful. But what's even more painful, that's the fact that we created a social death from dementia. People with dementia.
Even before the person is physically deceased, you just said that once someone has a certain degree of dementia, we have created a social death for them. I have never heard that before.
This is about
Yeah.
this is about stigmatization, Vonda, because I heard so many times from my housemates that they were experiencing pain, like emotional pain, because people were treating them as the other. People were treating them as not the same person. They were treating them in the way that they were speaking to their loved ones instead of speaking to them. So when someone gets diagnosed with dementia in the Netherlands, someone lives on average 8 till 10 more years. So you have 8 till 10 more years to live. Living in a nursing home in the Netherlands is only the last stage of someone's life. On average, people live in a nursing home in the Netherlands for only 8 months. So it is about quality of life, always. And that's also the beautiful thing what I've learned to come back to my housemate Ott.
Yes. Uh-huh.
I met him in the close ward. We both were living. He was my neighbor.
Uh-huh.
And in the beginning, when he came in the nursing home, he was feeling really depressed. He was not happy. He wanted to leave. He was raising questions like, why am I here? I want to go out, but I'm not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we started to become friends. And after a few weeks, after a few months, every night he came to my room to ask me, are you going with me to watch a soccer game and to drink a beer? And
Mm-hmm.
we became such a good friends during the time in the nursing home. Unfortunately, he passed away, but he really learned me that it's still possible to build friendships with reciprocity. I have to say in this that Ott didn't know my name. So rationally, he didn't know my name. But emotionally, he felt that we had a relation of trust. And I really loved Ott, and Ott really loved me, I can tell, because we share beautiful moments, and we went out often. So it was so beautiful to experience this, and it was breaking all the stigmas we have about aging and all the stigmas we have about living with dementia.
You have a unique experience other than family members whose families live at home with them with dementia. You have a unique experience for most people to understand truly that Ott was still Ott. So
Mm.
you tell me, did Ott understand that he had changed with time, or did he still feel that he was the 60-year-old going to drink a beer? And I mean, where was he in time?
Yeah.
Help me
Uh,
understand.
yeah, I understand your question, but I don't know, or it's right to answer the question because
Oh.
it's not up to me to say in which state Ott was, because I don't judge about it. Sometimes he was of my age, sometimes he was older, sometimes he was still going to his dad, but it didn't influence our relation with each other, our friendship. So
I
I,
yeah, I guess my question is, he was upset with living in the nursing home. Did he assign value because in the Netherlands you go there for the last 10 months of your life, 8 months of your life? Was he upset about that, or he was upset about the change of environment? He was no longer in the house he raised children in. What was he upset about?
yeah, of course, about living in a nursing home, because in first instance it's not a place you actually want to live in, because you are allowed to live there only when you have a care indication. So you are excluded from society because of your diagnosis, and you're living on a closed ward. So the reciprocity with society changes. And that's also why it was so beautiful that we had the contact with each other, because then we were able to share our experiences. And because of the fact that I could share my experiences, Ats got a whole new life, and I got a whole new life by learning from Ats, but also from my other housemates. Like, we have to be honest. If you live in a nursing home and you're eating with each other, or you're just passing by when you go out, then you build up a relation because you see each other every day. And also in the way we were living together, it was really beautiful to see how At was taking care of Ellie, for instance, but Ad was also taking care of Tineke. So he was really a loving man. And that made it possible for my housemates, Ad and Tineke and Ellie, to also take care of others. So um, in the end, it's about a caring community
Mhm.
on which we should focus more.
What are some of the things that you were surprised to learn from your experience? From when you went in on day one to when you exited 3.5 years later, what are some of the things that you were surprised to learn?
Um, I would love to say a few things. Um,
Yes.
at first, from living in a nursing home, it completely changed my perspective on dementia. Because if it's about dementia now, we mainly speak about loss. In the 3.5 years I lived with people with dementia, I never spoke about dementia. We were speaking about the things you speak about with your friends as well, about
Life and food and
daily life.
yeah.
Exactly. So that's a different perspective. If it's about dementia now, we mainly hear the perspective of others and not the perspective of people living with dementia themselves. I will give you one example to make it a bit more concrete from that, because in the Netherlands we have an Alzheimer's association, and now they do have a campaign in which their slogan is, "By dementia, you lose yourself and each other." That's the dominant narrative on dementia. It's focused on the total loss of identity. And we don't help people with that because we stigmatize people. And that's not what we should do. We should help people based on a more human-based approach and based on people's dignity, on people's emancipation. So we really have a responsibility as the environment of people living with dementia to change our own perspective. And secondly, what I've learned in the last few years, because Jonathan and I made the film, and we visited 11 countries and 4 different continents to see how different countries, cultures cope with dementia.
Yeah.
And what we heard the most is that people said in other countries, "Why are you guys coming here since you are from the Netherlands? You do have one of the best care systems in the world." And
Healthcare systems.
yeah, yes, sir. Healthcare systems, yeah. And that's so interesting because it is about the perspective you look at quality. Indeed, we have a big care system, a healthcare system, but we mainly focus on people's diseases. We mainly focus on people's quality of care. But as I said before, we should support quality of life rather than only quality of care, because quality of care is important, but it can be a tool in order to facilitate quality of life. And that's so beautiful to experience, also in the Netherlands, but also in other countries everywhere in the world. There are people who already strive for a better quality of life. So there are huge ambassadors for this. And we really should embrace the change, because then we really help people with dementia.
Did you, in your travels to the 11 countries, find instances or pockets or even whole countries that were doing it well? The way you would want to see quality of life honored in old age?
To me, what was really surprising, I will give you a few examples. For instance, Moldova. In Moldova, they didn't have specific care facilities for people living with dementia. People with different needs were living together. So they didn't exclude people because of one diagnosis. No, it was more of a community. There's still a lot of improvement possible because the facility people were living in was looking really bad, but the way it was organized was more supporting living together.
Huh.
Secondly, South Africa was really interesting because in some parts of the country, especially in the townships, they didn't have nursing homes because they didn't have the resources to build nursing homes. Because of that, people were kept in society and there was taken care of people more and more. And that was not an individual's responsibility, but it was a responsibility of the whole community. So living together was the answer in order to survive. If we speak about
Can you give me an example in South Africa how the care of someone with dementia what does that look like, that a whole community took care of them?
Yeah, it depends from part of the country to part of the country because it's also about the cultural perspective.
Uh-huh.
But in some parts, they didn't have a label of dementia. So they didn't know what dementia was. So people were not othered because of that. On the other hand, we really need knowledge about dementia because it could also help people. So it's also always about what do we do with the knowledge we have. But in South Africa, they showed us that the key is in the community because everyone wants to matter, everyone wants to belong, everyone wants to be part of a community. And the best thing is to support communities more and more so people are being kept inclusive.
So they're just in society, living in homes. The neighbor might come and support the family member in a multiple ways. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and we, for instance, visited Arlene and her father, and her father was living with dementia. And Arlene was living in the home of her father, and she was taking care of her father every day. Um, and because of that, her father stayed in the community. And the community, so the sisters and the brothers of Arlene, facilitated Arlene so she could stay home.
I see.
The message I say now is not that everyone should stay home to take care of their parents, but it can be really inspiring to hear that in other countries, people take care of each other more and more.
Did you visit any Asian countries in your travels?
Yeah. We've also visited South Korea,
Uh-huh.
in which prevention of dementia, especially Alzheimer's dementia, the most common form, is a state priority. So they developed a digital program based on 24 weeks, and they had algorithms to trace people's capacities, but also the challenges they have. So it had 5 pillars based on the fingers method, designed by Miyaki Vipelto, a well-known researcher in the world. And the first results of the program they had 220 centers in the country to help people with changing their lifestyle. And the first results showed that it's possible to prevent 40% of the diagnosis of Alzheimer's dementia if people start at a young age with changing their lifestyle. And that's a really interesting thing.
Is that what you're talking about? Okay. Uh-huh.
That's a really interesting thing because in our world we don't hear a lot about it. And what was more interesting was that it not only helped people to change their lifestyle, but it also supported communities because people came together for the program to train together when they didn't have a diagnosis. So they were building communities again, and they were strengthening the networks in society. So it was a really beautiful initiative, which is already here. And I want to tell one last example about America, about the United States, because yeah, people always ask, have you seen something nice in America? Yeah, of course, because also in America are beautiful examples and also people who strive for quality of life. We visited an initiative in Cleveland, Ohio, and it is an intergenerational school in which elderly teach younger people in maths and language. And under the elderly are also people living with dementia. But the most surprising thing is that they don't tell the kids who has dementia and who hasn't. And because of that, there is no labeling. So people are just acting normal to everyone. And that's such a beautiful example of social innovation, which is already here.
I'm gonna check that out. Cleveland, Ohio is very accessible. So in that school, are they little children? Are they grade school children with like grandparent type people? Is that how it is?
Yeah, you're right.
And so they're just commingling, one tutoring the other, taking care of each other in this environment. That's so beautiful, isn't it? It's like a home. My parents, who are 85, and at this point, well, according to your definition, and we're not putting labels, they may have dementia. I just haven't recognized it. I don't. I think they're couldn't be diagnosed with it right now. But this intergenerational uh community that you're describing, I think it builds the young people in so many ways. Do you tell me your point of view on that? Because we've been talking about the point of view of people who are much older, But now that we're talking about intergenerational living, which I do every day and value highly, what are your thoughts of the lessons for young people?
I think, and I will give you some examples,
Yeah.
that this is exactly the point of the societal issue we live in. Um, I don't live in a nursing home anymore, so now I try to support the community I live in now, in Amsterdam. But I don't live in a nursing home anymore because people, yeah, especially the media, they always made a story from, oh, there's a cute guy living in a nursing home and he's taking care of elderly. But that's not the message. The message is that it is really strange that we think it's so special that a young person lives together with dementia, because that tells why it is not normal anymore. Um, in order to in, in order to support intergenerational living, our Dutch government raised a subsidy, an intergenerational subsidy. And what was really interesting about this is that care organizations, they applied for the subsidy and they started to let young people living in a nursing home. But it was not working properly. And why? Because this has to come intrinsically. Of course, institutions can facilitate, but what happened now in the Netherlands is that, for instance, a nursing home said, you
Yeah.
you get a 200 euros or dollars less for your rent if you do volunteering work 20 hours a month. If we see living together as this, then we instrumentalize people's contact. And living together is not about amusing people and going to a theme park with others or going to somewhere else. Living together is also about sitting next to each other without speaking to each other, but feeling that you are close. That's the real definition of living together, that you have the feeling of security. And that's totally different than security in the actual care system, in which we say security is having a close ward. Um,
I
so
totally get what you're saying. It's not because when you, I tell me if I've gotten this right. When you make it so special, or that's what you're saying, you moved out because the point was it was so special. This young, handsome guy is living in a nurse. It's not about being special. It's about
no,
cohabitating with other human beings, is what you're saying.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. I want to give you one more example from which really could help people to change their narrative, because no one wants to see someone as a patient. Like, everyone has the feeling that they see someone with dementia as a human being. But
No.
the reality is that people still feel being stigmatized. And this has to do with the image we create as care, as healthcare on dementia. If you look, yeah, um, I was living with my housemate Ellie very closely, in the same period as I was living together with Ott. And we really had a strong friendship. Ellie wasn't always able to speak because of her dementia, but we were able to give each other a feeling of security by the way we were looking, the way we were, for instance, hugging in the morning when I said good morning to her. But I had the privilege, as I said, to leave. And when I came back, there was a moment I heard from the carer, Teun, would you please be less close to Ellie? Because if you are not here, she's feeling really sad.
Oh,
And when I heard that, the first thing we do is to judge. Like, why do we say that? But that's not what we should do. What I thought is, wow, but isn't it beautiful that someone, a woman of 92 years old, in a late stage of dementia, is feeling sad when you are not here? That someone is allowed to experience sadness, that someone is allowed to feel anxious, but on the other hand, that someone is allowed to feel happy, that someone is allowed to experience the feeling of security. In the end, this is about our human image, and a different human image is the key to this change, which is so badly needed, because we have to accept that also someone with dementia could experience all those kind of emotions. Like, we don't feel happy always.
Time.
We also experience feelings of loneliness, feelings of being anxious. But if we look at the way we create as healthcare an image of getting older or living in an institution or living with dementia, then we only see happy people on the websites of care organizations. So as healthcare, we create an image. Come to us, we can make you happy, because when you are at us, you start smiling with a very wild smile. So in the end, it's about a more nuanced story about living with dementia, and it's about a more honest story in what we could do as healthcare. And we are not here always to make people happy, because that shouldn't always be the aim. We are here to support people's quality of life and to help people with a good life as possible.
I think anybody listening should now go rewind the last 3 minutes and listen to what you've said again, because it is okay for Ellie to miss you, because she is a human being, and that is a normal human emotion. If she were 32, no one would tell her not to be sad because you left for the day to go do your work or whatever. No, we wouldn't even think to tell her. We'd say, of course you miss him, you're friends or whatever, right?
Mhm.
But it's just so interesting to me that, and no wonder you named your documentary Human Forever, because I totally get what you're saying now, is that the societal death of plucking people's very identity from them because they have enough birthday candles to burn down the kitchen, or because their brain isn't functioning in the way it once functioned. What you're saying is that everything that made them human 60 years ago still makes them human today. And that, don't let me put words in your mouth, but what you're making me feel is that no matter what medical, or in the United States, we say CPT code, there's a code for every diagnosis that you can assign to someone's life, they are still living in the richness of being a human being, with all the up and down and sad and good and bad, bad behavior, good behavior, whatever we assign to it. That is still the full menu. Is that what you're saying? There's a full menu of being human still available, no matter what status we perceive someone's brain to be in.
As long as we want to see the full human being, then it's still there. But if we look at someone's CPT, we call it a DBC in the Netherlands, or we call in Germany they call it the Pflegegrad. So every country has the same way of looking at someone with a disease. It's a very medical system, and of course that's really important because it could help people, but not always. So we should change our approach, not organizing healthcare systems based on people's need or what we think people need, but we should facilitate people based on their needs. And because of that, we should really listen to people themselves. That's the most important. And that's also what I've learned from my housemates. To come back to what I said at the beginning, during my study, I learned many methodologies, many techniques. For instance, a methodology, motivational speaking. But since I was living in a nursing home as a housemate, as a resident, I firstly learned how to listen to people without having your own perspective or your own agenda. Really listen to people, and then you hear a human voice, always.
Oh, that is so profound. Listen to people without your own agenda, and then you will hear a human voice. I think that's a profound lesson amongst the many lessons that you've open my eyes to, and hopefully other people listening eyes. Because I think from my perspective, I think what happens when you assign somebody a CPT code, whether it's dementia or cancer or whatever, a broken leg, a broken femur, it makes it easy for us to compartmentalize people, but it also enables us to objectify people in a way that doesn't tell the whole story. And for me, the outcome of this 45 minutes we spent together is a real cautionary tale, isn't it? To not automatically assume based on a word, dementia, that we even understand the person.
Mhm. Mm. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have to say, Vonda, that some people feel really frightened about the future, but I honestly feel really hopeful because I've seen that there are so many good initiatives already, but it's still the exception on the rule. So we should make it the standard. And what I really want to say to your audience is please don't copy. Please don't copy the Netherlands because we are the Netherlands. Please value your own culture. Because in the Netherlands, we always think in more money, more healthcare workers, more time, more products, but more doesn't automatically lead to better. It is about what do we do with the resources we have. And to give one example to that, I was sitting next to Ots, next to Ellie, next to Eugenie, and we were sitting in the living room, and we had, it's called a tovertafel, a magic table. It's a kind of a beamer, and it projects sort of games on the table. For instance, digital butterflies, and the thought is that if my housemates stood digital butterflies, that the wings are opening, and then it should give meaning to their life. And the only thing what I could think is, oh my God, we are sitting here in the Netherlands in a system which costs 18 billion euros a year. And we are tapping digital butterflies while the door to the garden where the real butterflies are is locked. And why is the door locked? Because we don't dare to talk about the risks which everyone faces in their life without dementia. And that's really the point we should speak about. So there's hope. The change is in us.
I love that. I don't want to say one thing more. That was so profound and the perspective shifting. The only thing I want everyone to know is where they can screen or view Human Forever.
Yeah, we are still busy with the distribution. We are now in touch with PBS. We are hoping that it will be broadcasted there. But people can follow on Instagram or LinkedIn. It's my name, Teun Toebes. And I will bring people in touch with the message as soon as we know more.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time today. I've really enjoyed this conversation and pivoting my perspective on what it means to be human forever.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Vonda, because it's so beautiful that you also embrace this message, especially as a surgeon, because it's so badly needed that we get a more human view of people living with dementia.
I'm Dr. Vonda Wright. See you next week.